Good afternoon. My name is Rob Crowder from Crowder Solar. Myself and the OYA Solar team are excited to present today an informational session about community solar and the Franklin County Solar Project in New York. So as a bit of an overview of what we'll be talking about today, we will begin with some background about the project itself, timeline, what's gone into site acquisition, preparing the site for construction, as well as some of the high-level community benefits of the project. Then we'll get into the mechanics of what is community solar, how can it benefit you and your community. And lastly, we'll finish up with a case study about community solar. I am pleased to join the OYA Solar team today. Myself, Rob Crowder from Crowder Solar. We are solar developers and consultants based in New York State. And I'll be serving as the primary point of contact for anybody who's interested in pursuing a community solar subscription for the project. Colleen, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Colleen Mulhern. I'm the inside sales manager at OYA, and I manage the subscription efforts for our community solar portfolio.
And you've also got Greg Rossetti. I'm the head of origination for OYA Solar on the development side. And I'd like to share a little bit about OYA Solar. OYA Solar started from some modest beginnings as an early stage greenfield developer of community solar assets. Since then, we've extended our reach within the northeastern United States and also extended the scope from community solar into utility scale solar as well. Community solar primarily being 1 to 5 megawatts in project size, which translates into anywhere from 5 to 30 odd acres, to utility scale projects, which can range anywhere from 150 acres to 10, 20 times that size. Currently, we have a pipeline of over 1,000 megawatts of projects that we are directly involved with and currently developing. That represents approximately 100 plus projects, and in New York State specifically, which today's webinar is about, we are currently working on north of 35 community solar projects within various portions of the state, everywhere from Orange County all the way up to obviously Franklin County and across to Niagara. The project we're going to be talking specifically about today is a community solar project, a 5 megawatt AC project, 6.8 megawatts DC project within Franklin County. And these types of projects are not for the faint of heart, I would say, and they certainly don't walk themselves across the finish line. These projects take a significant amount of effort and resource to take from an open field to something that you see in the images in the presentation, which is an almost functioning solar farm. We're probably a handful of months away still. I think we've got an operational date of March 1st for this project. And as you can see, these are photos to the right that are likely only about a week old, I would say. We're almost through. We're probably approaching 50% of the foundations are installed. Those the piles that support the racking system that ultimately supports the solar panels. And as I mentioned, these projects require a fair bit of development and coordination to arrive at this stage. And that happens with internal resources at OYA Solar, along with a number of experienced consultants, in this case specifically as it related to the foundations, like to call it Polar Racking and PRI Engineering, our geotechnical engineering firm, for all their help in making sure that we've arrived at a successful project foundations, which is obviously one of the more challenging aspects of construction. But to speak a little bit more in detail about the overall process and how you go from sort of an open field in the countryside or in a rural setting somewhere to an operational solar facility, there are obviously a number of critical steps that we work through. And it all starts with a very sort of high-level evaluation of a site. And by high level, I mean, is there the utility infrastructure immediately available that we believe will allow us to inject the amount of power that we're contemplating into the grid? And do you have a landowner, and do you have land that is suitable for the type of project that we're contemplating? And once you've checked those sort of high-level boxes, and you've negotiated a lease agreement, typically a lease agreement with a landowner, then you can move on to some of the more detailed pieces of work to move that project along, sort of what we would consider the development timeline. And what you're going to see here on this slide is sort of a high level of this particular project and the timelines that we experienced here. It started back in 2018, in the early part of 2018. And I'll say anecdotally that in New York State, there was a lot of learning going on at that time. So the timeline you see here is likely a little bit more lengthy than the projects that we are currently developing. We can typically get from sort of the early stage lease to an operating solar facility in 2 years or even less than 2 years. This one was a little bit longer than that in terms of working through the myriad of details. And the key or the high level components to that more detailed development effort after you have the lease signed is a more detailed due diligence on the site. And along with working through the interconnection agreements that need to be in place with the utility companies, and then working through all of the various approvals that the various authorities have in jurisdiction from the DEC, and in this case, Army Corps was also involved because there were some wetland areas in the southwestern portion of the parcel. And then obviously all of that leads to a municipal approval or municipal permitting that is typically done in New York State under a site plan approval. And once you've managed to step through those processes, including public hearings and input from the public, you ultimately arrive at a site plan approval, which allows you to move into the construction phase. And ultimately an operational solar facility. So to speak, and maybe if you want to flip to the next slide, about the benefits of these types of solar projects, and I'll speak to them with respect to community benefits, and Rob and Colleen will dive into some of the more direct benefits as it relates to the subscribers and what it means to be a subscriber, and why these types of projects are gaining traction in the marketplace and appeal to homeowners and businesses alike. But at a high level, from a true community benefit with respect to the town and the county and the planning, or pardon me, the school districts, there are a number of impacts that these projects have on the community. The most is by adding an asset of this nature to the lands, you instantly sort of incur a tax component to these types of projects. In New York State, it's done under a pilot agreement structure, which is a payment in lieu of tax agreement that is negotiated through typically the economic or industrial development agencies in the various counties that we work in. And those agreements involve negotiated tax rates for the first 15 years of the project with the county and the town and the school district. any special district taxes that might be relevant for a various town. There are no abatements offered for those who do pay full tax on a fire district or a lighting district or a police district or something of that nature. So that sort of is the obvious benefit. There's an economic benefit to the community. That economic benefit extends into obviously during the construction phase. It's typically local resources that are leveraged, local bulldozers and skid steers and fencing contractors and aggregate pits, etc. The major equipment is typically brought in, obviously the solar panels and the transformers and other major equipment that's involved in these projects. But the construction work itself is a very obviously local effort, and you know, to a degree, these facilities cannot be automated in terms of the install. It is a lot of boots on the ground, turning nuts and bolts, and assembling these facilities largely by hand. Some of the other benefits that these types of projects have are actually environmental benefits. And those environmental benefits are derived through the type of planting that we do within these solar arrays. These days, we typically will plant with a pollinating ground cover. That pollinating ground cover serves a number of functions. One is you get a very deep root structure with these clover type based pollinating ground covers, which is great in terms of preventing erosion. And also from a maintenance standpoint for us, these lower type growth clover pollinating seed mixes cut down on the maintenance cost, but also provide a much needed resource for local beekeepers and bees that we so desperately need these days, unfortunately. There are some other approaches that are being explored, such as sheep farming inside of the array area. Do you get questions about goats and cattle? Goats and cattle don't really work inside the fenced area of these solar facilities, but sheep certainly do, and there are a number of solar farms that currently have sheep grazing inside of the array. So that's another potential opportunity or benefit that these facilities provide is ready grazing fields for sheep farmers. There's also the more technical or the carbon offsets that these types of facilities generate. In this case, a facility this size, it's again a 6.8 megawatt facility. I forgot to mention that. And just in terms of scale, to quantify that, we're generating in the neighborhood of 10 million kilowatt hours. That was a number on a previous slide, which translates into anywhere from 500 to 1,000 homes, depending on how big, obviously, and the nature of the consumption in the home. But these facilities, just to put it into a ballpark, 200,000 tons of carbon offset is what's expected and calculated over the 25-year short life of these facilities. These facilities tend to operate for 25 to potentially 40 years. And then one of the other interesting aspects of these types of solar facilities, which certainly in New York State, is the idea of decommissioning bond that is a requirement under the site plan approval. And that decommissioning bond is a surety or an insurance package, for lack of a better description, that ensures that should something unforeseen happen over the course of the life of the project or potentially at the end of the life, the county and town and landowner are assured that there are funds available for the removal and remediation of the site. And by remediation, I mean restoring the land back to its original condition. So unlike your local nuclear facility or coal facility, those were not considered back when those types of plants were constructed, but certainly with these renewable projects and solar in particular, decommissioning bonds and contemplation for decommissioning is all part of the overall project structure and narrative for these types of facilities. So what I think I'd like to do now is hand it off to Rob or Colleen to speak a little bit more about the direct benefits to subscribers, or what we affectionately refer to as subscribers to these facilities, and what a subscriber really and actually means for community solar.
Thank you, Greg. So there are many benefits of going solar from a financial, social, and environmental perspective. However, community solar is one of the most seamless ways to go solar. One significant benefit of community solar is that it provides savings on your utility bill up to 10% per month as soon as the project you're subscribed to is up and running. Unlike purchasing a solar system with community solar, you don't have to worry about an upfront investment to participate in the program. In addition, you don't have to worry about incurring maintenance and operational costs. If you don't like the look of solar panels on your property, have a poor quality roof, are renting or have a shared roof or sun, community solar enables everyone to go solar without having solar installed on their premise. The project itself is developed at a remote location instead. Since each community solar project is a few megawatts in size, there are many efficiencies and economies to be realized, as Greg mentioned. Unlike the burning of fossil fuels, which releases carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases, community solar helps generate clean energy to counteract climate change. Solar panels produce no polluting gases when used to generate electricity. Next slide. So you may wonder how exactly community solar works. Well, as I mentioned before, community solar projects are located in a remote location. The electricity produced from the project is fed to the utility, which is used to determine bill credits calculated using the VEDR value stack for each subscriber under the project. Each month, the subscriber will then receive a credit on their utility bill as a separate line item, which is calculated by multiplying the bill credit rate by the electricity generated under their subscription. The subscriber will pay OYA a subscription fee each month, and this is equal to 90% of their credit amount. The difference between this credit amount and the subscription fee equates to approximately 10% savings. So community solar is one of many ways to go solar, as you all may know. Depending on your risk-reward appetite, when you want to see savings, and if you would rather not have solar on your property, are some of the factors to determine which option is best for you. As you can see with solar and purchase outlay is are guaranteed over the life of the project, which is typically 25 years, unlike the case with rooftop solar where initial investment is required and savings aren't immediate. One major benefit of community solar versus rooftop solar and PPA is that you don't have to worry about on-site installation and construction, and you simply sign up for a subscription and receive confirmation when the project is complete, and then just have to look forward to seeing credits on your monthly utility bill as soon as the system is up and running. As a potential subscriber to community solar, you will need to do your own due diligence in determining which solar company you want to sign up for with community solar. Certain factors that you should consider are the company's background, such as the reputation in the industry, how long they've been in business, contract terms within their subscription agreement, such as length of contract, their cancellation policy, and how subscription fee is determined, date of operation of the project. This will determine how soon you can realize savings, as well as savings on bill credits. Are there guaranteed savings on bill credits? Operational and future solar projects. So it's also good to look at the pipeline projects and locations of projects that these solar companies have. Keep in mind that the project has to be under the same utility as you, the subscriber. And now I'm going to pass it over to Rob.
Thank you, Colleen. So I will now speak about a case study of Christopher Community, which is in the process of subscribing more than 30 of their projects to community with OYA, including to the Franklin County Solar Project. Christopher Community approached us wanting to know how they could reduce their operating expenses using solar, and after a process that I will describe, we found that they are able to generate a total bill credit value each year of more than $428,000, resulting in over $42,000 of savings a year, which adds up to more than $1 million of savings over the 25-year life of the project. A couple benefits that Christopher Community is particularly excited about. One is that there's no capital outlays, there's no upfront cost to them. Secondly, it eliminates the complexity of installing, operating, and managing a rooftop solar system. And thirdly, they have sites in 2 utilities, and they're subscribing their projects to OYA Solar projects in both NYSEG and National Grid territories. So let's take a look at a couple cases. Here we have what's called a demand metered account, which is a building that is a more intensive energy user. They have an annual bill credit value after analyzing their bills. How many kilowatts do they have? What's the value of those kilowatts for the community solar project? The annual bill credit value is $30,330. As Colleen so well described, the OYA bill is 90% of that, or $27,297. And in turn, the site will keep 10% of that, or $3,033. Over 25 years, the savings add up to more than $75,000 for the Stryker home apartments. And this project is the Franklin County project that Greg provided the background on. To provide a little bit more depth in terms of the application for this project, then we took a look at the average value stack rate, essentially the average rate that the utility will give credit for, which is 10.1 cents per kilowatt hour, right? And in turn, then Stryker Home Apartments is saving 10% of that. The other question we need to look at is what percentage of the total solar project needs to be allocated to this particular site, to Stryker Home Apartments, to be able to offset their full bill. After running the numbers, we found that 3.3% of that total project needs to be allocated. Second example is a mass market meter. That simply means it's a less intensive energy user. Part of what's interesting about this site is it's actually National Grid territory. So for those of you listening in who may have properties in both National Grid and NYSEG territory, or just National Grid territory, then we have an opportunity for you as well. So here we took a look at the numbers. Same math is applied. Just over $21,000 is the annual bill credit value. The OYA bill is 90% of that, or around $19,000. The annual savings are around $2,100 a year. Over 25 years, the savings then add up to a projected $52,650. Here, the value stack rate is modestly higher at 10.8 cents per kilowatt hour. And when we run the numbers, then we find that 1.67% of this project needs to be dedicated to the Villa Scalabrini site to fully offset to really optimize the community solar project in terms of bill credits and savings. So when Christopher Community was thinking about how do we decide whether to do community solar and should we work with OYA, then they ran through benefits of community solar. Some is that there's a simplified management and ownership of multiple solar projects, especially across multiple utilities. Right? That was a benefit of working with OYA. Site control was already in place. As you heard from Greg, there's not only site control here, but construction's underway. System will be turned on fairly soon. There's a customer subscriber agreement That was there were some tweaks made that were able to really customize it for Christopher community to make sure that it worked for them. And then they were assigned actually 2 solar projects, one in NICEAG territory, another in National Grid territory. So some benefits of working with OYA, one is that there's experience and expertise, as Greg described, as well as the size of the team and the depth of the team. There's certainty, again, of site control. It's a little duplicative here, but worth emphasis because if you don't have site control, you don't have a project. So we're well underway with the site. And lastly, there's attractive pricing, the 10% savings deal structure they were very excited about. So to conclude, in terms of subscribing projects to the Franklin County solar site, then it's worth emphasizing that the savings on the bill credits are guaranteed. That 10% savings is yours no matter how the system's performing. You're keeping 10% of the savings. Secondly, there's an immediate opportunity with this project, but because the project is under construction, it will be turned on in the very near future, then there's limited capacity, right? There's only so many bill credits, there's only so much savings that can be subscribed to the site. And lastly, there's an opportunity to generate some larger benefits in terms of supporting renewable energy and contributing to cleaner and healthier communities in New York State and more globally. So we thank you for your time and look forward to your questions.
I have a question.
Please.
How do you reconcile the fact that you take away a certain amount of forested land, which is already a carbon sink, and replace it with the solar panels?
I guess I can address that question. It's Greg here. In this particular case, we didn't actually deforest to install the system. The land that we installed on was pasture land and marginal pasture land at best. And that was specific to the Franklin County project that I discussed earlier. But to more directly answer your question, with respect to carbon sink, we've done, I mean, there's a number of studies out there, and you can have a look at offsets with respect to the CO2 offsets to the solar farm represents versus the carbon sink that mature trees provide. And what you'll see is a significant benefit from a carbon offset over the life of these projects. So, I mean, there are a variety of studies that you can find online. I forget, there was one government agency that ran a study, which is the one that I typically reference. I don't have it with me right now, but could certainly share that if you wanted to pass along your contact info. I could share a link to that study.
That'd be great. Thank you.
But it's a great question, and it comes up a lot. It seems the irony of clearing woodlot for the purpose of renewables. Yeah, there is an irony there that needs to be discussed, and I can say that typically we try to avoid clearing any woodlot or as little as possible.
Yeah,
the only other benefit that I would say is that in areas where you do have woodlot, quite often I've had landowners excited about is clearing woodlot, because in order for us to install a solar facility, we do have to clear N-grub or de-stump or whatever term you want to use for, foliage comes out, tree comes out along with the stump. So ultimately what we end up leaving for that landowner after the end of the lease, after 25 years, is arable farmland that wasn't there before solar arrived, so to speak. And if you look at the cost to clear and grub an acre of land, it's quite often, it's extremely cost prohibitive. If you look at generating $150 profit for a landowner on farmland, I'm just picking a ballpark number out, certainly in New York, upstate New York, that would be appropriate. And if you have an $8,000 or $10,000 cost to clear and grub, you'd be hard pressed to make economic sense, or farmers would have a hard time making economic sense of clearing any type of significant acreage. So there is a benefit even in that type of scenario.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have a thank you, Greg. We have a series of questions about the subscription process. The first being, could you please go over the subscription process one more time? Sure. I can start off with that. The first question in terms of a subscription is just making sure that you are in NYSEG territory, that this is the right project for you to subscribe to. Then we'll take a look at your electric bills and say, well, how much are you spending per year and how many kilowatt hours are you using on an annualized basis? That'll tell us how many bill credits we can allocate toward your account. We'll then run the numbers and really provide a demonstration of here's what the savings will look like for the first year as well as over the course of the first 25 years of the site. So then you have a tangible understanding of what the savings are. And lastly, there's a subscription agreement to formalize the savings so that you are actually going to enter into a contract with OYA Solar that will ensure that you are going to get those 10% savings, that those savings are guaranteed over the life of the project. And it'll also provide information about the percent of the project that you are allocated. There's a second question. Do the bill credits apply to the energy portion of the bill, or can it be used to offset distribution charges?
I can answer that.
Please.
So the credit is applied to all components of the bill. It's not necessarily the delivery or the supply. So we make sure that the subscriber is saving 10% off of the bill when it comes to the bill credit.
Excellent. Thank you, Colleen. We have another question from Joe G. How does it work if you get energy supplied from a third-party supplier? Can you still sign up for community solar? Colleen, do you want to take this one? Or I can jump in.
Oh, I'm seeing the question now. Yeah, you can take it if you want. Go ahead.
Sure. So the short answer is yes. You are able to sign up for community solar. The slightly longer answer is that what needs to happen is that third-party supply bill needs to be placed on your utility bill, which can happen with a phone call to your third-party supplier to make sure that everything shows up on your NYSEG bill or on your national grid bill. The reason is that essentially there's an accounting process with the utility to show how much are you spending each month on electricity and how many kilowatt hours are you using. So as long as you third-party supply bill and that is being processed through your utility, then there's no issue. In the event, for whatever reason, that you don't want to do that, then you can still get savings off of the share of your bill that is not through your third-party supplier, but there's really no reason to go that route because you can simply, with a couple phone calls, make sure you're getting that full bill offset.
From what you're saying, distribution costs are handled under this evaluation of the bill?
Yes, that's correct. All charges are considered when determining allocation to a solar project.
Maybe I can mention a couple of other things, Dave, against your question about carbon sink. Maybe I'll just offer up a couple of other common questions that I tend to get with respect to the development of these types of projects. Normally, not only are we trying to avoid woodlot areas, both from an environmental but also an economic perspective, but other common concerns about solar facilities are visual screening, impacts on the scenery. A common aspect to these solar facilities with respect to permitting and site plan approval is visual screening, whereby we might do slatted fences or arborvitae or other types of vegetative screening, depending on the lay of the land, obviously, and maybe the surrounding lands that may be impacted by the construction of these types of facilities. That's a common question that we get, and a common element of these types of projects that is addressed during that permitting process. Quite often in New York, the towns are increasingly implementing specific laws, solar laws, ordinances, bylaws that are meant to guide the development of these types of projects across the state. Not every town has them, obviously, but there are an ever-increasing amount of towns that are implementing solar laws, which is helpful for us as solar developers and useful in terms of ensuring that that facilities are going where the local communities are accepting of them.
I had a question regarding, say, the owner of a large property wants to subdivide his property down the road. How is that handled to future rent owners or property owners from the first property that all this was assigned to?
Sure. Okay. Great question. Those types of things typically would be contemplated at the very early stages. And the only reason I say that is if you have a parcel that is, let's say, 50 acres, and the installation of the solar facility is, and the local laws require through offsets and from backs and side yard setbacks and the like, that you need to sort of position that 30 or 35 acre solar field on, a 40 or 43 acre parcel to make it all work and satisfy the various ordinances and laws, then in that scenario, it's unlikely you're going to be able to carve out a chunk. But all of that can be known ahead of time. In the case where you've got a large parcel, let's say you've got a 150 acre parcel, contemplated a facility in a portion of that land, and we're made aware that the owner wants to at some point carve out 15 acres for, I just had a very recent example, quite frankly. Landowner it was a 112 acre parcel. They wanted to carve out 15 acres for one of their kids. They didn't know where exactly. We were able to accommodate that in the lease and, draw a bit of a sandbox into the existing parcel and reserving that space as that land as it relates to the notion that it's going to be, subdivided at some point down the road. So all of that was taken into consideration with that particular project. So there are ways to deal with all those types of future or forward-looking realities, I guess.
One more question with that. With regards to transmission lines and the capacity and the future need, do you work with NYSEG or National Grid towards, or is that their end and you work just on availability?
Well, there's some limited information that's made available to solar developers with respect to available capacity in the distribution lines being the lines that sort of run along the roadways and not the high tower transmission lines that run through the countryside. The distribution lines, as I mentioned, there's some information published by the utilities, by NYSEG, and by National Grid and ORU. And usually that's what we're using as a bit of a first pass when we're evaluating the potential for a site. And then ultimately, you have to get into a far more detailed study, with the utility, and that's a lengthy process. It's typically anywhere from 6 to 8 months to arrive at what we describe as an interconnection agreement. And that interconnection agreement lays out exactly how much power we're allowed to put into the grid at that location and what the costs are for us to be able to connect. That includes any substation upgrades or any other infrastructure upgrades, poles, conductors, etc. And then ultimately it arrives at a construction schedule and payments made to the utilities to facilitate procurement of various gear, transformers and switches and air brakes and whatever else might be needed to connect that particular project.
What about the use of batteries? Is that considered?
Yeah. Well, batteries are an interesting aspect of renewables that are being implemented on certain projects. The economics at the moment are still a little bit challenging, but that's changing just as solar did. 10 years ago, prices were 10 times what they are for the equipment, and batteries is seeing a very similar type reality with the costs coming down. No different than your flat screen TV, frankly. But the question about batteries, is there a specific interest on that, or just that you're just curious about it?
Just curious on the availability and practicality of it.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a component of these types of renewable facilities going. I won't say going forward on everyone, but in the future, I think you're going to see more and more storage added as an element to these facilities. And for projects like the Franklin County project in particular, that's already permitted and under construction, at some point, should it make sense to add a storage component to that project, then we would be going through an entirely new permitting process with the town to ensure, fire safety and any environmental impacts. That the equipment checks all those boxes today, but there's still some questions, and national fire codes are being updated to account for the entry of storage into energy projects, and there's been some great strides made over the last 3-4 years. Okay. And I'm just going to have a quick look at some of the chat window here. I see a few more questions that have come up.
Yeah, so there's a question from Ola Kunli. How can OYA Solar power be invested here in Nigeria? We lack electricity here. How can we assist them? So
yeah, that's a more common question, to be frank. It just by virtue, international solar projects, due to the financing component of these projects, is treated differently. Obviously, it would be treated differently in Nigeria than it is in New York State or in the Caribbean. You've got different types of weather risks. You've got different types of country-related risks, and so it's a little bit more complicated. It's a tough question for me to answer in a chat form like this. So if you'd like to send us an email directly, then maybe we can look at some specifics. So wetlands and floodplains have on solar. So what effect do wetlands and floodplains? I just saw that question pop up. Normally we try to avoid wetlands and floodplains. Floodplains are not all created equal, nor are wetlands. So it really depends on the nature of those environmental resources. Floodplains, again, depending on the height of the floodplain, if you've got a potential 100-year storm where you're going to have 7 feet of water or 15 feet of water, that's different than a floodplain that might experience 6 inches of water or a foot of water. You can account for those types of elevations through construction, and even higher than that. And then it also depends on the local laws, whether they'll allow you to construct inside of those areas. Technically, we can deal with it at a constructability or an engineering level. It's sometimes a question of what the authorities having jurisdiction will allow. Wetlands, depending on the nature of them, whether they're state regulated or federally regulated, can have different considerations, and again, whether those are significant wetlands or if the wetlands are currently being farmed, there's a lot of considerations that go into how you would address wetlands and floodplains. If there's if you have a more specific question, I could maybe try to give you a little bit more detail.
Thank you, Greg. We have a question from Kenneth Schmidt around what are our plans for subscribers who have demand, municipal, and religious institutional accounts. The short answer is to subscribe them to the project. All types of users are able to subscribe. There's a limit of 40% of the total capacity of the site can be subscribed to demand-based accounts. The remainder must be subscribed to mass market accounts, which would be more your residential, single family or small multifamily homes. Some religious institutions, some municipal accounts as well will qualify as mass market. So it's a little more complex than that. So as the short answer is, we're looking to subscribe anyone who has an electric account. There's a basic creditworthiness threshold. But otherwise, really, we are opening up and subscribing locally to the extent possible for the Franklin County project. Colleen, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, as long as these potential subscribers fall under the same utility as our projects are under, so NYSEG for the Franklin project, then that's a requirement. So something to consider.
So I see a question here. What are your plans for subscribers who have demand account? What about municipal? Okay, and then at the bottom of that question, so you guys answered that, where does OYA have running arrays today? The arrays that are running that we were involved in are out further west. Franklin will be the first operational community solar that we are physically putting subscribers to, so to speak. And there's another 15 that are scheduled for next year as well to come online. Operational arrays. We have arrays in Minnesota. We have some in north of the border in Canada. We have arrays in New York that are operational through partnerships. Yeah, maybe if you want to email me directly, I can maybe speak to specific. That's the same email from Ken.
your agreements obviously would vary by municipality then, in terms of what you've discussed here applies to essentially Franklin County. Would that be a model, or is that subject to municipalities or counties that you're going to work in other areas? You know what I mean?
Like for the subscription agreement terms, are you saying?
Your offerings, your types of offerings, how you handle credits for the distribution and the power. Would that be like a model approach you're going to look at? Or say a Western county in New York State wants to look at it, or a municipality. Do you offer this to any type of user, or is this dependent on location?
Like we use the same type of agreement to for any potential subscriber. We might have to tweak the terms of the agreement in order to satisfy both the seller and purchaser, but overall it generally has the same terms across the board.
Okay, thank you.
And Terry, I apologize. I was calling you Dave earlier.
No problem.
Any last questions? We're coming up on the hour.
What about post costs in terms of returning the land to initial use, original use? Obviously, the older
we're obligated to remediate. We also post a surety and a bond through a third party finance, it's an insurance company that provides a policy to ensure the funds are available in the future. NYSERDA, the state agency, has recommended guidelines for the cost of that forward-looking 25 and 40 years. Quite frankly, the reason you don't see these types of bonds in many other jurisdictions was because if we installed an array on Monday, I could get it removed on Tuesday for $0 and probably put money in my pocket, because everything in that array is effectively recyclable. So the scrap metal guys would be drooling to get their hands on everything in that field. It's galvanized steel, it's aluminum, it's copper, it's, they're all, a significant amount of recyclable material in the array. The reason these bonds and decommissioning came up is because towns were concerned that at the end of the life, when the solar company went in to remove the facility, the landowner might say, whoa, why don't you just leave it there? I'm going to play part-time metal speculator, and I'm going to remove it in 10 years when the price of aluminum is that much more, or copper. And the towns at that point don't want what used to be an operational facility that was maintained by a solar company to an eyesore, frankly. So the town started requiring these bonds to be in place so that they could have the right to remove them. It was less about the landowners and concern that somebody would walk away from these types of projects. These are some of the most attractive types of investments that the world can offer today, and there would be I couldn't imagine a scenario where a solar company would walk away from an asset like this in the field, even in 25 or 40 years, frankly.
Thank you.
So I guess we'll probably look to wrap up unless there's any last minute questions, but I think Colleen, Rob, it's a pleasure joining you today.
Yes, you too.
And I'm sure folks can email either you, Colleen, or you, Rob, if they have any other questions, and we're happy to field those following this webinar.
Yes,
but we thank everybody for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.